Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Always in Season podcast, episode number 12. This week, we're going to break down the AFC East and just go through their division and some of the changes they made. But first, we've got just a little bit of weekly news, not a lot this week.
Yeah, there really wasn't much, nothing like contracts or anything like that. Right now in the NFL, we're just really waiting for, news about Brendan Ayuk and what's going to happen with that situation with the Niners. Right now it's just a lot of drama and a
Yeah,
lot of noise, but nothing official has happened. And then there's been rumors that Aaron Rodgers, he missed minicamp because he had a trip to
yeah.
Egypt. And like you said, we saw him on Saturday.
Yeah, he was at UFC on Saturday. So I don't know. He said it was pre planned, but I don't know. It still goes to show kind of where his priorities are.
Yeah,
But
but we'll see if he shows up to training camp. I assume he will. And then the other big thing is we're just still waiting for that Jordan Love contract. Everyone believes it'll happen before the season. It might even happen before training
yeah,
camp. But it'll be a big one.
yeah.
It's just a matter of like the guaranteed money, how many years, all of that.
Yeah, I would be pretty shocked if I mean, definitely if he won't step on the field with a new contract. I kind of do expect it before training camp, but if it doesn't, I would be very surprised if he held out because he's already shown that he doesn't care about that. He's left it up to his agent. But again, like you said, it's going to be a big contract. It's just a matter of the guaranteed money.
Yeah, I think he's always been willing to bet on himself, and I'm sure they'll get it done. Both
Yeah.
sides want to get it done. It's
hmm
just a matter of the actual details.
Right.
But now we'll jump into the AFC East, starting with the Patriots.
Last year they went 4-13. They didn't. They obviously they missed the playoffs, but they have a lot of changes.
Yeah, they do. Their offensive rank was 30th, but then their defensive rank was
Yeah.
7th, and their special teams rank was 3rd. So obviously the offense was that weak point. But now, like you said, with the changes, especially the big one of Bill
Mhm.
Belichick being gone, we'll see how that affects the defense because
Yeah.
he was a great defensive mind.
Yeah, defensively they were, yes, like you said, seventh overall and fourth in rushing. So they had a pretty solid defense, but offensively they were, like you said, 30th, 28th in passing, 26th in rushing, and last in points. They averaged about 14 points a game, which
Mhm.
it's just
That's not going to win you a lot of
yeah,
games.
a lot of changes, and I guess we all kind of knew mid-season that Bill Belichick was not going to be back.
Yeah, so for those new additions to the coaching staff, Gerard Mayo is obviously the new head coach, and he added 17 new coaches to his staff. The big ones are Alex Van Pelt as offensive coordinator and Jeremy Springer as special teams coordinator. They promoted DeMarcus Covington for defensive coordinator. And then an interesting addition to the coaching staff is Dante Hightower, who used to be a
hmm
linebacker for the Patriots. He is now their inside linebacker coach, which I think is really fun.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I mean, Gerard Mayo just came in and basically cleaned house, overhauled the whole coaching staff, which, I mean, I feel like more coaches should do that, have guys that they feel comfortable with. And then as far as players go, they added guys like Jacoby Brissett, Mike Onwenu, KJ Osborne, Jalen Rager, Antonio Gibson, and Austin Hooper. So they're kind of getting a lot of help offensively that they needed.
Yeah, I also like Sion Takitaki at
hmm
linebacker for them. That's a really big addition. And then for the draft, obviously the big one is their first pick, Drake May.
Yeah.
He is. We're not sure if he will be the starter week
hmm
1, but I'm sure he'll get reps throughout
Yeah.
the season, and it'll be fun to see, how he progresses throughout the season. And I know he's met up with Tom Brady, and
hmm
Brady's really a big fan of him, and I think he's just a good character guy.
hmm
So I think that leadership will show through. But then they also added quarterback Joe Milton from Tennessee, but he might not be a
Yeah.
quarterback. They might use him in other ways. So I'm excited to see how that turns out too, especially when you have a new head coach, just a completely new system. It's not the Patriot way
Yeah.
anymore. It's all new. They might get fancy. They might just have fun with it, be
Yeah.
creative. So
Yeah, I think I wasn't very high. I'm still not very high on Drake May, but I think this year is such a big rebuilding year. It's such a like okay, there is like basically no chance that they're gonna do anything. We looked at their schedule; it's rough, but I think Drake May should sit for a little bit. I
hmm
don't think they should rush him, but yeah, I just think with Gerard Mayo, it's a whole new system, and Drake May is a new quarterback, and it'll be interesting, like you said, to see what they do with Joe Milton.
yeah, and like you said, with like they don't really have a whole like star team in
Yeah,
place. They're all it's a completely new system, new regime, and so even when Drake May goes out there, if he doesn't do well, even if he looks pretty rough, it's not like people are gonna just count him
yeah,
out because they know that the Patriots in general are probably gonna look pretty rough
right.
this year, and it'll be more of like, all right, where are we going from here?
Yeah.
And are we growing? Are we going from game to game? Are we
Mhm.
seeing improvement game to game, and then also, from next season? But when you have Jacoby Brissett, a veteran, a good leader, I think it's smart to put him
Mhm.
out there in the fire and let Drake May sit and watch and
Yeah.
learn. But for key losses coaching, I mean, it was Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, there was, coordinator positions, things like that. But Bill Belichick's the big one. And that's a tough. I mean, it's going to be weird not having Bill Belichick on the sidelines.
Yeah, I believe he's doing like a little bit of analyst, and he was entertaining during the draft. So like we all love Bill Belichick, and I hope he does more analysts because he's hilarious. And I don't know if this is the end for him coaching wise. He may just take a break, but he's got nothing left to prove. But I think he does want to break that wins record.
Yeah, and Bill Belichick, he does smile when he's an analyst. Maybe
Mhm.
not as much on the sidelines,
Right.
but he'll crack a lot of jokes as an analyst. So it's really entertaining to watch. For the players, I mean, Mac Jones was a big loss. Not that he was a great player for the Patriots necessarily, other than that one Pro Bowl year. But when you lose a quarterback, your starting quarterback,
Yeah.
that's big. And then some other big losses were Devontae Parker, Mac Wilson Sr., Mike Gesicki. Those were the other big ones, I would say.
Yeah, J.C. Jackson and Adrian Phillips, but like you said, Mac Jones is the big one. Even though they kind of, I wouldn't say they failed him, but just I don't know. It was such a weird year because, like you said, he made a Pro Bowl, and then after that, he was just like he looked like a backup.
Yeah.
So he's in Jacksonville now, and they've started over with Drake May. So completely hit the reset button in every facet of the team.
And I think that was smart. I think it would have been hard if they, reset coaching, but then kept this quarterback or the star player. I think having a completely fresh start is going to be good for the culture there, good for everyone inside the building. They can kind of create their new identity. For their schedule difficulty, like we said, it's rough. It's a brutal schedule, especially right out the gate. They have the 10th toughest schedule, but it looks a lot tougher than that. I think the reason it looks tougher is because of how many unknowns we have with the Patriots team. So they start out with the Bengals, which, I mean, now that Joe Burrow's healthy, their team in general is healthy. That's a tough. I mean, they're a Super Bowl caliber team. Then they have the Seahawks, the Jets, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Texans. Like, that's just a rough couple of weeks to start out. Again, a good reason to have Jacoby Brissett out there.
Yeah, I think, that is a good point. I think throwing Drake May essentially into the fire I don't think it would be good. Yeah. But I think they need to, again, be patient with him. And you're not going to win a lot of games, especially with that schedule. So I think, I think it would be best for them to throw Brissett out there.
You're going to have to average more than 14 points a game if you're going to win some of these games. Now their bye week is week 14, which is interesting because if they had a week 7 bye week, you could more easily say all right, Jacoby Brissett's going to play, the first 6 weeks, and then maybe they'll switch over. But with that late of a bye week, we might see, depending on how they're doing, we might see Drake May out there before. But if they get to the bye week, they're already eliminated from the playoffs. Yeah. They're already not going anywhere. Then maybe for the Cardinals, Bills, Chargers, Bills games, those last 4 weeks, maybe they'll put Drake May out there and see what they have. I mean, we saw the Chiefs. Now, it was because they were doing so well. They had already secured that playoff spot. When they had Alex Smith, they put Patrick Mahomes in for that final week. And they saw what they got, and they loved it, obviously. So maybe they'll do something like that. But this season for the Patriots really is just about seeing the changes that they have and seeing if they can improve game to game.
So I think that's it for the Patriots, and then we're going to move on to the Jets. All right, moving on now to the New York Jets. They went 7-10 last year, and the big one, obviously, they lost Aaron Rodgers 4 snaps into the season.
Yeah, that definitely set them off on the wrong foot. They still won that game week 1, but it was pretty up and down after that. Their offensive rank was 31st, and then their defensive rank was 3rd. And then their special teams was 17th. So clearly their defense was getting them the bulk of their wins that they had. Obviously people expected to change with Aaron Rodgers being back, that their offense will, at least be top 15, they're hoping. But we really, other than the 4 snaps, the last time we got was with Aaron Rodgers was with the Packers, and he didn't do that well. Now, people keep saying, the thumb injury, but the thing is, there was more than just that. I feel that was making him, I think he was on the decline. Now, I don't mean that he was, turning into an awful player, but he's not the same player he was in 2020. He really isn't. And now with coming off a major injury, I think we're going to see flashes of the old A-Rod, but I don't think it's going to be as consistent. that we'll get from him. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But also, they don't have necessarily a bunch of star power on their
Yeah.
offense.
I think a lot of it, as Packer fans, we know how Rodgers likes to control a lot. So I think a lot of the offense is Aaron Rodgers' offense, players that he wants. And even in Green Bay, he did change a lot of the schemes that LaFleur ran. So I think coming into last year, or yeah, when they got Rodgers, they were like, they knew what they had in their defense. Yeah. And they showed last year that their defense is more than enough to help Rodgers, which is what was criticized a lot in Green Bay is he never had a defense. But then offensively, I think you said having an Achilles injury and coming off it at his age is not easy to do. If somehow he comes out and just is like the old Aaron Rodgers,
great.
great. I don't know how he would do it, but who knows what drugs he's taken this time. But yeah, like their offense, you can look at it 31st in total yards, 30th in passing, 23rd. Like they were just horrible.
Yeah, they really were kind of an embarrassment on offense, and I don't think the coaches really helped with it because they're really inconsistent about who we're putting out there in quarterback, and are we even behind our quarterback? Like that was really messed up, I think, or unprofessional is probably the way to put it. But with Aaron Rodgers, I mean, we'll see what we get, but at least we know that we're gonna get somebody who knows, like he knows the scheme. He's gonna know the plays. He's gonna know most, if not all, of the defense that he'll be facing. Where the other quarterbacks they had didn't necessarily have that type of brain power or just experience. Yeah. So they'll be better on offense. It's just a matter of are they going to win enough games to make the playoffs in this division when you have two other teams that are really good.
Yeah.
And the AFC in general has a lot of fighting. Now, we'll get to their schedule later on, but it looks like that the last 4 weeks will determine, or very, very might determine if they're making the playoffs or not. But for coaching, they didn't have anything significant. They brought back most of the coaching staff, all of their coordinators, and obviously head coach Robert Saleh is still there. But for the draft, I mean, personally, I feel like a good steal was Braylon Allen at running back.
Yeah.
I think that was good for them. And then, other than that, they added offense and defense. It was offensive heavy in the first half, and then more defensive in the later rounds. Yeah.
And then in the offseason, they got guys like Hassan Reddick, Mac Williams. The big one was Tyron Smith. They got Rodgers the protection he desperately needed, and then Malik Taylor.
Yeah, Mike Williams they got too. So yeah, and I think Rodgers is happy about who they grabbed on offense. And then Tyron Smith. I mean that, like you said, that's really big. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Yeah. For key losses, again, nothing significant. For coaching losses, for player losses, Dalvin Cook, I feel like was their big one.
Yeah, they did lose C.J. Uzomah, but again, I think their defense is their secondary is what really shines for them. Like they were second in passing and 25th in rushing, so that just goes to show they were completely opposite on that side of the ball. But they replaced Dalvin Cook with Braylon Allen. The kid's 20 and doesn't look like a 20-year-old, but I think it's a great fit for him there to learn with Rodgers, and we know what he was like at Wisconsin, and hopefully he can have a bright future in the NFL.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how the young guys react to Rodgers. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, he was on The Herd this past week, and he was talking about the differences between Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, because he's played with both.
Yeah.
And he said that Mahomes is a lot more vocal and a lot more like rally the whole team, where Rodgers is more of getting up in your face, personal one-on-one. And so a guy like Braylon Allen, I mean, he said he watched that growing up, and that he knew that's what he was getting into. And I think that can cause some fear in young guys, but also kind of like all right, I'm going to, I need to make sure I am on my game. Like, even, like, obviously everyone's going to have mistakes, they're going to have their learning moments, but I think what Rodgers wants to know is, like, even if you don't catch this pass or, that kind of thing, or you fumble, I think it's more for Rodgers, are you learning your playbook? Yeah. I think that's what
I think it's a trust. It's a lot of trust. Like, you saw a lot in Green Bay. Rodgers had his guys. And then, obviously, that first week, it was Christian Watson's first year. He dropped that touchdown on the first play of the game. And I think that was like Rodgers. You could see he was up. I was very upsetting to watch and frustrating to watch. But then Watson had that game against Dallas that year, and I
Four
think
touchdowns.
that was the game where it's like Rodgers learned to trust him, and I think once you get Rodgers' trust, that's a big thing because then he will go to you, look to you more. But like you said, it sounds like Mahomes is more of like getting everybody involved,
Yeah.
whereas Rodgers is just like, okay, I have my guys that I know I can trust, and the other ones need to kind of keep up.
And I think that's hard. I feel like personally, I feel like that's not how I would want my
Right.
quarterback to lead. But Rodgers is a veteran, and he kind of gets to just do what he wants,
Yeah.
honestly. And it'll be really interesting to see with this Jets team
Yeah.
how he is, and maybe some of the things will change based on
Yeah.
how he was with the Packers versus the Jets. Maybe he has some like I don't know self growth moments and self reflection. But
Hmm.
for their schedule, it's 14th toughest. They don't have like any like big stretches of like oh this is a tough stretch, this is an
Mhm.
easy stretch. It's really up and down. Like we mentioned earlier, it's really the last four games that I feel like are going to be telling, which is the Jaguars, then the Rams, then the Bills, and then the
Mm.
Dolphins. Those are some tough games, I
Yeah.
would say, and probably against all teams who are either fighting for a playoff spot or already locked in a playoff spot, and it's just a matter of which
Yeah.
seating.
Yeah, I just think like it's gonna come down to what Rogers do we get. If even if we get like mediocre Rogers, I still think that might be enough to like put them in the playoff conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But playoff picture and I don't know, like you said, with that, with the division and having the Dolphins and the Bills who were very good last year, it's going to be tough to sneak into the AFC playoffs.
Yeah, and the Bills, I feel like, I mean, they're gonna have to deal with some changes.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
really will, which we'll get into. But still, they're a talented team. And but for me, it's less about the division. It's more about the AFC as a
Yeah.
whole. Because there's just so much talent.
Right.
I mean, heck, the AFC North might have three teams in the
Right.
playoffs for all we know. But it'll be fun to watch. But I think that's it for the Jets.
Yeah.
We're
Yep.
gonna move on to the Miami Dolphins next. All right, so now we're moving on to the Miami Dolphins, who are second in their division.
Yeah, they went 11-6. They did lose to the Chiefs in Arrowhead, and they proved that maybe they're not a cold weather team.
Yeah, they're really not, and it's really hard to practice for that when you're in Miami.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I mean, teams have tried to do creative things, both for preparing for cold weather and preparing for hot weather, but it's just
It's different.
It is, and we're just gonna have to wait and see this
Right.
year. Offensive rank was first. They were firing on all cylinders. Defensive rank was 10th, so I would say above average. And then special teams rank was also 10th. So they had a really good team. I think they just didn't show up in the playoffs. I think was like the main thing. Their coaching additions, the big one is Anthony Weaver, defensive coordinator. They also had a Joe Barry, linebackers, run game coordinator. And then offensive coaches, Roman Sapula, offensive coordinator, and then Parks Frazier and Jonathan Krause as offensive assistants.
Yeah, and the kind of I would say free agency additions. The big ones were Shaq Barrett, Kendall Fuller, Jordan Poyer, Jordan Brooks, and John Smith.
Yeah, and then their big draft pick was their first round pick, which was edge Chop Robinson. People were really high on him coming out of the draft. I think that'll be a big addition for their defense. But their key losses for coaching was offensive assistants Ricardo Allen, Mike Judge, and Colby Smith, and then special teams coach Brendan Farrell. But again, the core of their coaching staff did stay, which I think is important. I think Mike McDaniels is happy with who he has. But they had a lot of key losses for players, honestly.
Yeah, Christian Wilkins, Xavier Howard, that was a big one. Emmanuel Agba and Connor Williams. So
Yeah.
I don't know, they lost.
And Andrew Van Ginkel.
Yeah, that was a big one too. So, but I don't know. Like you said, their offense with Mike McDaniel was electric, and the defense was okay. They were you said 10th overall, 15th in passing, 7th in rushing, so they were okay. But I don't. They just hit the cold weather, and they just were a completely different team.
Yeah, their schedule difficulty, it says 23rd toughest, and I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, now they have a week 6 bye week, which for most teams I feel like they don't like. I think this might work in the Dolphins' favor though, because I think they want to be able to get on their groove by then, like after the bye week, like okay, and then be able to just kind of keep it rolling, as opposed to like the late bye week where it might get things disjointed, which they can't afford late in the season, because for most of the season it's pretty manageable.
Yeah.
There's a lot of winnable games. They need to make sure they win those games though, because then week 13, Thanksgiving, cold weather game against the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. Then they have the Jets, which is a division game, so that's going to have playoff implications. Mm-hmm. Then the Houston Texans, who are probably going to be in the fight for a playoff spot. And then the 49ers, which obviously is a Super Bowl caliber team. At least we know they can get there, not necessarily win it. Right. And then the Browns week 17, and then they also end with the Jets again. So that's their tough stretch. But it's more of like they're big games because a lot of the teams are playoff games.
Yeah, and then like you said, hopefully by that point, they've won the games that they need to. They have a really early bye week, which kind of is unfortunate. I hate early bye weeks, but yeah, I think that tough stretch. It's not necessarily like obviously they're tough teams, but these teams are going to be fighting for playoffs, and I'm assuming the Dolphins will be as well.
Yeah. And it'll be fun. I'm just like I don't know. I love that we went going over the AFC first because it's such a fun conference, and I'm really excited to see how many teams are fighting for those playoff spots in the final 3 weeks because it could be like so many different playoff scenarios, which I love. Like the seedings can be completely switched from based on one game, and I love that. I think the NFL is just so great though. But I think that's it for the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, and then we're gonna move on to the Buffalo Bills, who had more than a few changes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so now we are going to end with the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, they went 11-6 last year. They lost to the Chiefs once again.
Yeah.
They lost a lot of their offense.
Yeah, their offensive rank was 4th, and then their defensive rank was 9th. Their special teams was where it was rough, which was 26th. But like you said, they did have some key losses. For coaching, they didn't have, for their coaching additions, that is, they had some promotions, like Bobby Babich from linebacker coach to defensive coordinator, which is a big promotion. But then they hired a new quarterbacks coach, Ronald Curry, which I think that's a big one because, I mean, Josh Allen, like, I think there's a lot of things that Josh Allen's really good at, but if he can kind of help, like, do the fine-tuning of Josh Allen, that'd be really great. But for the draft, I mean, their big one was Keon Coleman, who's a likable player. Right. And, I mean, I think they're going to need that help at wide receiver.
Yeah. And then in the free agency, they got Josh Allen some help, MVS, Chase Claypool, Curtis Samuel, Matt Collins, and then Mitch Trubisky. But again, Josh Allen just need some help with some of the guys they lost.
Yeah, and then they added some like role players on defense. But for key losses on coaching, it was really just offensive assistant Mike Shula was their big one. But again, a lot of their coaching staff stayed in place. It was really the players that they had the changes at.
Yeah, and then losses: Mitch Morse, Jordan Poyer, and Tre'Davious White, and then the big ones were Gabe Davis, and then they obviously traded Stephon Diggs to Houston. So Josh Allen lost his number one guy.
Yeah, he did, but I think that might be for the best because I think it became so toxic towards the end that it'll be nice for Josh Allen to have guys that like he can just rely on. And I don't know. For me, like even if none of these players are as talented as Diggs was, I'd rather have guys that can do their job and I can like count on the character, you know, as opposed to a diva. But Diggs is now in Houston. For their schedule, their 5th toughest schedule difficulty, and it kind of shows. I don't know. I think it's really after the bye week.
Yeah.
That's the big thing because they have coming out of the bye week, they have the 49ers, Rams, and Lions, which is tough. They might need to win 2 out of those 3 games to stay in the race in the AFC. But then they have the Patriots, Jets, Patriots. So a little bit easier, you know. It's like big bump, and then they have a little nice relaxation before the playoffs hit.
Them and the Dolphins both went 11-6 last year. So again, I'm assuming they'll be fighting with the Dolphins, but it'll just be interesting to see where Josh Allen turns to as far as the receivers go, how much Keon Coleman gets involved, but I don't know.
Chase Claypool we're getting.
Right, yeah, and then the big loss on defense was Tre'Davious White. So they were pretty solid on both sides of the ball, but just so many changes that I feel like there's just kind of a lot of questions.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions. But I think it's interesting because we looked at the Dolphins' schedule right before this, and the Dolphins have a pretty tough last couple weeks, like last 6 weeks, where the Bills, it's like a tough 3 weeks, but then their last 3 are more easy. So like last year, like you said, they had the same record, but it came down to the last game against each other, and the Bills won. Just for both of them to end up losing to the Chiefs.
Right.
But the Bills have an easier end of schedule than the Dolphins overall, and so that might be the deciding factor where the Bills end up winning the division. But I think the seeding and if they get to host versus not, I think
Yeah.
that's going to be really big. But we'll have to see how the whole AFC
Yeah.
plays out.
Yeah, I think it's gonna come down to seeding, and like they always say, like seeding and matchup is what it comes down to in any playoffs. Um, but the AFC is going to be a dogfight to say the least.
Yeah, and the Dolphins are going to want to really host because they don't want to have to play in cold
Right.
weather. So they're going to want
Yeah.
to play in Miami for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for this week. Next week we will be going through the AFC West.
Yeah, so stay tuned.